Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to another healing moment. We want to welcome you, those of you on Zoom and our YouTube platforms, and those of you here. We want to say a special welcome to you. For you joining us for the first time, welcome. We do have our special evening for you this evening as we continue with interpersonal relationships. And we have the three segments for you here. We have the spiritual, we have the mental, and we have the health aspect of our program. Now, last week, Sister Carter spoke about forgiveness. Then we had Sister Sherry Sobers, who spoke about the different types of conflict. And this week, she's going to speak about conflict resolution. Now, after Sister Sobers, we're going to have Sister Dupree, and she is continuing with the cells. Now, we've learned a lot for the past 2 weeks about cells. We've talked about the white blood cells, we've talked about cell relationships, and I can't wait to find out what is coming this week about cells. Now, remember, you, the attendees, have your time to participate in this program. After Dr. Dupree, we're going to have a question and answer segment where you can participate. So get your questions ready. Get those questions from last week and this week ready, along with this week's one, and we can have a very interactive session. Now, if you want to speak, we ask you that you raise your hands and we can ask you to unmute your mic and you can ask your questions. So here we go. Let's start with Pastor Lucas as he gives us a word of prayer and goes into the spiritual part of our program.
Hello, everybody. Good evening to you. We are glad to be with you again another evening. And we're going to pray at this time as we get into our activities for the evening. Let us bow our heads, everybody. Our Father, we give you thanks and we give you praise. We are thankful, Lord, for the opportunity to be able to share with each other from your word, from the areas of health, whether it be psychological or even physical health. Bless the proceedings this evening is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. For devotional, this lines up with our topic for the evening as we continue with conflict resolution. Matthew chapter 5:44 tells us, "But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you." Now, these are some very difficult things to do. These are not things that people generally or normally do. A matter of fact, it requires quite a lot from us to be able to accomplish these. But these are the standards of God's spiritual kingdom, and the standards that we ought to attain to in our everyday lives, and we should aim for them. I suppose, as the topic says, many people would say that those things are humanly impossible. I have a story for you, though. Michael Widman, a tavern owner from Pennsylvania, was a bad-tempered and unfriendly man. He lived during the North American Revolution, 1775 that was, to 1783. And in this revolution, which confronted, this revolution was, it confronted the army of the independent General George Washington and the British General William Howe. One night, two of Howe's men in civilian clothes lodged at Widman's Inn. During dinner, the reckless Widman spoke of General Howe in a disrespectful and insulting manner. The emissaries reported his attitude to the general, and Widman was taken prisoner and brought before General Howe. To put things right, Widman offered the British general information about the places where the revolutionaries were hiding their munitions. The general pitied him for his treacherous offer and dismissed him. And he did this without accepting the information. His conduct was immediately discovered, and some of Washington's soldiers arrested him. He was judged and sentenced to death for treason. Minutes before his execution, he was granted a pardon. Why did Washington pardon Michael Widman? The reason was the old minister Peter Miller. Years ago, Widman and Miller lived in the same community. Widman hated Miller and proved it by unfairly criticizing the minister, repeatedly spitting in his face and physically hurting him. When Peter Miller found out about the sentence, he firmly felt the words of Jesus in his heart. Love your enemies. Bless them who curse you. Do good to them who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Matthew 5:44. Without hesitation, despite the harsh winter, he walked all the way. This is Peter Miller. He walked all the way to the place of execution, which was 97 kilometers away. Wow. That was longer than, I think, 97 kilometers. Wow, that's some distance. Anyhow, he walked all that way. But why did he walk all that way? He arrived in time to speak to General Washington and seek clemency for Michael Widman's life. George Washington explained to him that it was impossible to pardon a traitor and that he could not do anything to save his friend's life. My friend, replied Miller, but he's my worst enemy. I am doing this because I want to act according to the rule of Jesus. The general answered him, did you walk for such a long distance to save your enemy's life? This puts everything in a very different perspective. I'll sign his pardon because of you, Pastor Miller. You may think that it is humanly impossible to follow the commandment of Jesus. Love, bless, and do good to those who hate, use, and persecute us. But God's grace will make it possible if you fervently ask for his help. Conflict resolution is what we're talking about today.
Thank you, Pastor Lucas. It's amazing that someone who considers another his enemy can walk 97 kilometers for an enemy to save his life. Wow, that is a serious conflict resolution. We have Sister Sherry Sobers up next. And if you were listening last week, you would remember that she gave us 6 different types of conflict. Now, I'm not going to name them. I believe she's going to repeat them for you. And she's going to talk about conflict resolution. So, Sister Sherry, let's hear your take on conflict resolution.
Thank you so much, Kathy, and good evening, everyone. I have entitled this week's episode Conflict Resolution 101. You know, when we're at school, when we're at the university, we do basic foundation courses. Well, today I hope to give you a crash course in conflict resolution entitled Conflict Resolution 101. So, while having a family discussion about 2 weeks ago, a conflict was identified. We identified the type of conflict that we discussed. And today, what we're going to be looking for is how we resolve this conflict. Do we use a one-size-fits-all approach? Do we use the style that our parents used when we were growing up? Is there a best solution? Is there a best fit solution? All of those questions. So let's dive into today's topic. And yes, Kathy, at some point in time, we can go through the 6 types of conflict. Now, when we are identifying how to resolve a conflict, people use different styles. We're going to go through those 5 different styles. I'll say off the top, there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all. There are some that are better than others, depending on the situation. You know, it's all about depends. It's all about what is going on at the moment. It's all about the persons who are involved, etc., etc. So let's look at the 5 styles people use when confronting a conflict. The first one is withdrawing. Now, off the top, you may think withdrawing does not sound negative, or does it sound positive? It sounds quite negative because it involves literally physically removing yourself from the conflict or psychologically removing yourself from the conflict, hoping that it will go away, kind of like avoidance theory. You only talk about it in a roundabout way and you avoid the conflict. And yes, that can cause problems in relationships when it happens a lot, obviously, especially if you avoid talking about the things that are really important to you or the other person, the things that really matter. Withdrawal can also worsen, or the very least it can grow and grow and grow more significant over time. And we don't want that. Instead, someone may even choose to avoid conflict by refusing to directly discuss the issue. But instead, they continue to bring it up in a passive-aggressive way. And we know how sometimes we can get being sarcastic, dropping, as we would say, little snide remarks. Obviously, this can increase frustration and make the situation worse for everyone involved. But you know what? Withdrawal isn't always bad news, because sometimes it depends on the level of emotions that we are all dealing with, that sometimes if it's really, really intense, you may need to just take a step back and then, or if the conflict is not really that important, just take a step back and approach it at another time or in a different way. So the first style is withdrawing. It has its bad points, it has its cons, but it also has its pros. Number 2, accommodating. Now, accommodating is resolving conflict by satisfying the other person's needs. As the word suggests, you accommodate them, accepting their ideas while neglecting clearly your own ideas. You give in to the person at your expense. You concede the conflict, which allows you to be, quote unquote, the bigger person. The others involved may feel positively towards you, but keep in mind, if you are always accommodating, imagine what can happen when other people are disagreeing with you and you're not getting your own needs met. Now, we can also understand what the picture will look like eventually. But maybe you don't mind if you want your partner to be happy. But I want you to think about this in a healthy relationship. Yes, healthy relationships should involve give and take. Yes, there should be a matter of accommodation. But if I accommodate for you, you know what? You got to accommodate me at some point in time. So it's a give and take. And as with most good things, moderation is also the key. Number 3, forcing. Now, off the top, again, this does not sound positive. So forcing is resolving a conflict by, as it suggests, Instead of accommodating now, you are forcing by satisfying your own needs. You want to win the conflict. So you try to get others on your side, and you would try to get them to see things your way. And clearly it can affect the relationship. If you use aggressive or manipulative tactics, sometimes again, resentment and resentful emotions can be stirred up. But it can also involve a polite request or attempt to persuade others to go along with your suggestion. Competition can lead to positive outcomes, particularly when you compete respectfully. So while off the top, forcing may not be the most ideal, it is your manner and your approach. Number 4, compromising. It is resolving a conflict by mutually agreeing with one's partner to partially satisfy each other's needs. So there's definitely more of a give and take here. This can make compromise seem like a great approach to conflict resolution. Everyone wins, right? And we want everyone to win in a conflict, don't we? However, since you lose a little, you have to weigh again. What are you really winning? What are you really losing? Down the line, when both of you remember and you concede and you think back and you think about it again, you may even feel frustrated or resentful. And in some cases, it may cause the initial conflict to flare up again. And so we go all the way around the hamster wheel again. So compromise can have its benefits, but it is generally better to get some of what you want, better than none at all. But it can also work well because it's not always possible to solve a problem in a way that completely satisfies everyone. Again, give and take. And the 5th one, collaborating. Now, collaborating is resolving a conflict by using problem-solving techniques to arrive at a solution that meets the needs and the interests of both parties. If we collaborate successfully, it really does mean that everyone wins. It's a win-win situation. However, it requires effort and it gives you more long-term benefits. Sometimes some conflicts need to be resolved not quickly, but urgently. And you do not have the time to really problem solve and problem shoot and all those kind of things. So while it can be very beneficial, sometimes it may have less popularity than the quicker solutions like compromise, for example. But to collaborate successfully, we must communicate. You see how important communication is when we look at the grand scheme of things in interpersonal relationships. Communication really is the foundation for a healthy, positive interpersonal relationship. You use the knowledge that you have to work out the solution that lets both of you get what you want. To collaborate successfully, you look at the conflict, you analyze it, but you look at it as a problem to solve together. It's not a competition. It's not about what I want, not what he wants, not what we want against what they want, but we are flexible as well. So you may be wondering, out of collaborating and compromising and forcing and accommodating and withdrawing, is there really a best method? I really wonder, should I go through these again and choose the best method when I'm going through a conflict? Now, the reality is, even though you may prefer, or even though one may sound better than the others, one of the strategies, all of the strategies can be used effectively depending on the approach that you take. They can be effective in resolving conflict. For example, as I said before, if the issue is minor and it won't have lasting consequences, it's okay to accommodate. But if it is going to be severe and if it's going to impact a lot of people, it may be best to choose another strategy. But whichever strategy we use, I want us to remember these important things. Think about how important your desires are. Think about the impact that it has on others. Think of the consequences of choosing whichever one, whether you're more assertive or whether you're more collaborative. And just most important, work on your ability to improve conflict. And with this, I leave you with 5 quick, short points. We all understand from the top, conflict exists in human relationships. So therefore, number 1, we need to listen effectively. We need to actively listen. Number 2, we need to identify specific points of disagreement. Let's not dig up and pull up all that happened 10 years ago. Let's deal with the specific points of disagreement. Number 3, and this again goes back to communication, express your own needs clearly. If you have to write it down, if you have to practice in front of a mirror, whatever you need to do, make sure that at the end of the day, your partner, whoever the person is that's on the other end, is hearing what you want them to hear. Number 4, view conflict as an opportunity for growth. And number 5, focus on specific issues without generalizing or escalating the situation. So therefore, when we approach our conflict, let's approach conflicts with conflict resolution with flexibility, respect, and the willingness to listen, consider other person's perspectives, and you'll have a better chance of successfully collaborating to find the best solution for everyone. And as usual, I leave you with a quote. So here goes. Whenever you're in conflict with someone, there is one factor that can make the difference between damaging your relationship and deepening it. And that one factor, my friends, is your attitude. Remember, your attitude counts for everything. Have a great evening, and I look forward to our discussion later down the show.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be well. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care. Yeah.
Thank you, Sister Sherry, for sharing those 5 conflict resolutions with us. And later on in the program, I'm going to share them with you once again. But next, we have Dr. Dupree, who's going to teach us about the cells again. But before Dr. Dupree, I want to remind you that after Dr. Dupree, you are going to have your chance to ask all the questions that you want to ask. So get those questions ready. Remember to type them in the chat or in the Q&A box so that we can answer those for you. But let's hear about the cells. Dr. Dupree?
Yes, Kathy Ann. Thank you very much. I am so happy to welcome my friends back again. Thank you for checking in once more. Um, I would just like to remind you, well, today I'm talking about improving communication, which is in the same vein as what Sister Sherry, our resident psychologist, was sharing with us. And I just want to remind those who were not present last week that we talked about, and the week before that we were talking about the human cell. And we're remembering that one of the important, well, all of the parts of the cell are very important. The nucleus is extremely important. Mitochondria are important. But what controls what goes in and out of the cell is the cell membrane. And remember that the cell membrane is made up of a layer, a double layer, a lipid bilayer, with the water-hating or water or hydrophobic ends of those molecules on the outside and on the inside, and in between you have the water-loving end. So they basically are coating the cells with a layer of lipid, and that controls what goes in and out of the cell. And it's also worthy of note that the cell membrane isn't a rigid structure, that is actually quite fluid and flexible and can change shape and change position. And it has channels and receptors that are able to flip sides or to bind to messages on the outside and cause changes on the inside. We talked about different types of cell signaling. We talked about autocrine signaling, where the cells speak to themselves or release messengers which are read by their own receptors. We talked about direct cell-to-cell signaling, juxtacrine signaling, paracrine signaling to cells that are in the vicinity, like cells. And we also said that all cells do not hear what the other cells in the vicinity say, but my internet connection is unstable. Can you hear me? Right. They have to have the right ears or the right receptors. And then we talked about endocrine signaling, which is where cells that are distant from, which is where organs produce messengers that have to travel quite a far distance to get to the target cell where they are. And so it should be no surprise that the key to your health lies in the health of your cells. It's just the same as we usually say that the health of a community or the success of a community depends on the individuals or the home. In the same way, the basic unit, which is your cell, if your cell membranes are healthy, if your cells are healthy, and in particular the cell membranes are healthy, then it means that you are healthy. And so I want to borrow from a well-known writer who said, guard well the avenues of your souls, meaning that you should guard what goes into your eyes, into your ears, even through your skin, because all of that determines what you are going to become. So you need to guard well the avenues of your cells, meaning basically you have to protect your cell membrane. I'm sorry. And so I'm going to quote from an article called From Organelle to Cell Membrane. The overall health of our cell membranes, in addition to their ability to function at maximum capacity, is largely dependent on one's diet, lifestyle, genotype, meaning the genes that you get from your parents, and environmental exposures. As you are well aware that chemicals in your environment, radiation in your environment can affect the functioning of your cells. But I want to talk about the first two, but I'm not going to go into details telling you what to eat, etc. But I'm going to talk about aspects of your diet that can influence your cell membranes. So diet and lifestyle. And from the same article, disturbances to the structure and function of our major tissues and organs, especially those that inhibit their inability to function optimally are often a result of dietary and lifestyle influences that impact cellular function. So there we go again. Dietary and lifestyle influences can affect how our cells function. So the nutrients in the food you eat can maintain healthy cell membranes. When we were in primary school, we learned that the nutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, minerals, and vitamins. But I did mention that cell membranes are comprised mainly of fats. So therefore, fats play a very, very important part in our diet. Fats can sometimes get bad name, and some fats have a very good name. It has been found that a diet high in unsaturated fats, so there are saturated fats and polyunsaturated fats or monounsaturated fats. A diet found high in unsaturated fats, and those are found in fish, for example, salmon, sardines, for example, and nuts like walnuts, and seeds like flax seeds, chia seeds, and even some beans like kidney beans. Those have the type of fatty acids that our bodies cannot make, and these are called omega-3 fatty acids. And because those are unsaturated, they tend to keep the cell membranes more fluid, more able to deform, change shape, be more resilient. But we talked about resilience last week. The unsaturated fats create cell membranes that are more rigid, more unyielding, and therefore unable to adjust as much to the environment. In Principles of Medical Biology, Chapter 5, the summary of that chapter says that the phospholipid component of the cell membrane is not static. It can change, not only in shape, but in content. Dietary fatty acids can change the composition of the cell membrane. And 3, it is likely that this relationship between cell membranes, fatty acids, in your diet, it is likely that this relationship between fatty acids and your diet and the cell membrane may become the basis for treating human diseases by dietary intervention. And for those of you who thought that you can only treat diseases by going to the doctor and buying some medication, it is very likely that as we get wiser about the relationship between our diets and our health, that soon we will be able to treat many diseases by simply changing or adjusting our diets. So again, omega-3 fatty acids are essential nutrients. That means our bodies cannot synthesize them, and therefore we have to take them in through our diet. These omega-3 fatty acids are incorporated into cell membranes of all tissues. We're actually told that about 40% of all the omega-3 fatty acids in our diet goes into brain and retinal cells. So the health of your eyes, the health of your brain depends on how much omega-3 fatty acids you get. Eating food high in omega-3 fatty acids may lead to a general increase in the overall health and well-being of the population. So if you want to increase or if you want to improve the communication between your cells, if you want to improve your cell's ability to determine what goes in and what goes out, you need to increase omega-3 fatty acids in your diet. And that was taken from the Canadian Medical Journal entitled The Science Behind Dietary Omega-3 Fatty Acids. I'm going to stop there. Next week, I'm going to continue talking about the role omega-3 fatty acids and cell membranes have to play in inflammation and cancer. So this is going to be it for today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. It has been very informative these past 3 weeks. Just listening to you talking about the different cells and what they're made up of and all these different things. Thank you so much. Now it's time for you, the attendees, to participate. And for those of you who are on YouTube, you can type your questions and we will answer them as well. So let's get to the questions. And the first question, this says, sometimes there seems to be no conflict resolution possible. If a conflict cannot be resolved, what do people have to do to manage it? I'll read that again. Sometimes there seems to be no conflict resolution possible. If a conflict cannot be resolved, what do people have to do to manage it? And I think this one is going to you, Sister Sherry.
I guess so as well. Yes, there are times when a conflict cannot be resolved. That's just the reality of human beings. How you manage it through on your end. I always say you can only manage or control what's going on with you, what's going on, how you approach it, what your response is. So therefore, if you know that thinking about it or constantly talking about a conflict that has not been resolved is not going to work, you manage your own your own feelings, your own emotions. You are respectful as well. If it is, for example, in the workplace where it may be really difficult, you have to see this person every day. At home, a husband and a wife, and there's stuff that is just not being resolved. You may have to find a different approach. You may have to do some introspection, asking yourself what can be done differently, how I may approach it differently. Sit down and see it as a problem that you solve together. And if that doesn't work, I always say prayer works. And when you can't speak to the person about the problem, you can speak to God about the person and about the problem. So sometimes we have to manage it either internally, where we manage our response, where we manage our reaction, where we manage ourselves, and then if it's beyond that, if it needs more than that, and we approach the person, we think of another way to approach it, or we always go to God. I think
in addition to what,
okay, go ahead, Pastor Lucas.
yeah, in addition to what Sherry said, I just want to pick up from the last point too. The text that we started with is a very interesting text. I don't think we stopped to study it sufficiently. It says, it starts like this: love your enemies. The starting point for everything, every form of relationship. Jesus says, love your enemies. Now that's attitude. Now, when you start with that attitude, it leads into the fruits that proceed from having a loving attitude. Yes, there are some conflicts that can't get resolved. Look what Jesus says. This is what he said, right? He said, love your enemies, one. Start from there. Then he proceeded to say, bless them that curse you. And he added some more, do good to them that hate you. Now, you may wonder, so what does that have to do with the unresolved conflict? You'll be surprised. The attitude to the individual it serves to soften whatever are the challenges going on. And furthermore, when you add to that, out of the attitude, you seek to bless or be a blessing to the person in other ways. Then you proceed to do good. You surround all that with doing good, right? That problem, big as it is, begins to get smaller. Why? Because what you give out comes back to you. When you give out blessing to people and you give out doing good to people, right? Things that are difficult start to become simple. So that issue that Jesus says to start with is crucial. It is crucial because there are some things we not going to solve, and some things you don't have to solve. Some things arise because of things that behaviors arise, and because of things that something that people themselves don't even know or don't even understand, right? But if the atmosphere is one of good, of being a blessing to and doing good to, and if that's the atmosphere, it goes a very long way in helping to heal a lot of things that you can't get solved.
Very true, Pastor.
Okay, we have another question, and that says, how can you get a conflict resolved when the person don't talk much and the person think that they're always right?
I'm
This one is going to be interesting.
I'm going to start where I ended with my session, where I gave the quote. And I'm going to read it again with a specific reference to this question. Whenever you're in conflict with someone, there is one factor that can make the difference between damaging your relationship and deepening it. That factor is attitude. Said that to say this. Sometimes when persons don't talk a lot, there are various reasons. We may say the person is not a talker. The issue may be that the person has things that they may want to say, and every time they start to say it, your attitude or your reaction to them maybe want to shut them down, and they may withdraw. So in asking a question like that, it is all well and good to put that question out there, but the person needs to be able to contextualize it, because it can be misconstrued based on exactly what is being said. If a person doesn't talk much, that is not necessarily a negative thing. It could be the way in which the discussion is going along. The person may agree with you, and they may not. And you may be saying, "Why are you agreeing with me?" But they may just be agreeing with you. Now, in terms of feeling that they're always right, again, that is attitude. And when a person feels that they're always right, sometimes it's better to just take a step back and allow life to play out, so that when things do not happen that they expect to happen, they can understand where you are coming from. For example, sometimes when you tell them that they always feel that they're right, they become defensive, and that just deepens the wound in the relationship already. So sometimes it's not, and I'm sure we know this already, it's not what you say, it is how you say it, how you phrase it, and the love that comes with it. Sometimes people's attitudes are not always warm. And again, we have to look at how our reaction to it, again, look at how we internalize what is being said or what is not being said, and how we respond to them. So that's just my take on it.
Maybe I can add a bit to it also. When an individual is always right or believe that they're always right, it's indicative of a deeper problem, right? It's indicative of a deeper problem. Now, if you recognize that you have to relate to someone who's always right, trying to fight it down is not a winning card. You're not going to win. Because actually, sometimes it's representative of the fact that, I need to protect myself. I cannot accept myself as being wrong, because it may be, for some people, it's embarrassing to be wrong. It is shameful, and sometimes these things are rooted in a lot of people's history, right? Sometimes a person may be fearful in the point of communication, because it may have been that somewhere in their own history, whenever communication was kind of shut down and an attitude developed, that person sometimes take into wider life for fear of what used to happen, which doesn't mean that you will the person will do it, but sometimes it is fear that leads to that. I'm fearful of this person. They may see them. Some people feel inferior, less than, and if they feel inferior, which means that they see you as superior, that's going to be a problem, right? That's going to be a big problem. So when these things are observed, trying to fight them down and point them out doesn't work. Jesus said, look, love your enemies. And that's the enemies, right? If he said love your enemies, what do you suppose he's going to say concerning those people who are not your enemies? Sometimes, and this is where I think one of the points came in earlier, sometimes you may need to become accommodative. And in respect to that, right? Because trying to fight it down, you're not going to win. So sometimes you may need to, not that you agree, but you see where this is going. And sometimes you got to wait for an opening or some other situation where it can be handled and the person doesn't feel, as we say in Barbados, you don't feel a how. You don't feel about it, right? So these are things that have to be considered because there are lots of people who they don't like to talk, not because they can't talk, but sometimes they're fearful as to what will come after they've finished spoken. So I think the attitude of love has to be the ultimate. In other words, I'm saying that you tell the person, I love you, I love you. I'm saying so. I'm not saying that. The atmosphere that the person is surrounded with, or that you surround the person with, should communicate that. And it helps to disarm the fears, and it helps to disarm that, right? That's what Jesus said, love your enemies, love them, and bless them that curse you. That's always right. All right. We ain't fighting about that, right? But it's a way sometimes to learn to where maybe you can help a person or the individual to understand the issue of, all right, we agree to be different on this, right? All right, I respect your opinion. I don't agree with it all, but I respect it. But this is my opinion, okay? Without the other person feeling as though they get shamed or, minimized or whatever else. That may be a good opportunity to put that thing into place where, we agree to disagree. Because many people are not there. But we can learn to get there.
And thank you, Pastor Lucas. This one goes to Dr. Dupree, and it asks, so are you saying that the relation between a healthy cell and lack of disease is critical?
Yes, please. Those fatty acids, those lipids in the cell layer can be damaged by reactions that go on in the cell itself. Because there are certain reactions that go on in the cell that release what we call reactive oxygen species, and it oxidizes those phospholipids, damages their ability to protect the cell. And that is why we also promote diets that are high in antioxidants. Antioxidants can be found in fruits and vegetables, and the darker the fruits and vegetables, the darker the berry, the sweeter the juice. But also, the darker the vegetables, the darker the fruits, the higher they are in antioxidants. So eat your berries and your dunks and your carrots and foods like those, the highly colored foods. They are rich in antioxidants and they help to repair the cell membranes.
Okay.
And keep them healthy. I don't want to be the one to throw cold water, but I realize it's 7 o'clock and some people have other things. So we may have to actually put off some of those questions.
I would just say one thing, Dr. Dupree.
Sure.
One thing I noted was that that the intercell communication is significantly enhanced by the use of the omega-3 fatty acids.
Yes, certainly.
I think you mentioned that. Yeah, so that actually helps to resolve any conflicts that any intercell conflicts.
Yes.
When I say resolve it, so conflict resolution even is applicable in the cell.
Yes. Yes. So we'll go further into it when we talk about inflammation next week and the role of certain fats in inflammation and how damage to the cell membrane can release those pro-inflammatory messengers. So, yeah. And I saw another question about fats and insulin resistance. It's more complicated than just obesity. It actually has to do with free fatty acids and cholesterol, for example, in the blood, and they have been known to be associated with insulin resistance. The mechanism isn't clearly defined, so you can't just say that every person who is obese is going to have insulin resistance, but it is related to the level of free fatty acids in the blood, and very, very, it's a very complex relationship, but it is well documented.
Okay, this one goes. So is it just a theory that healthy, well-nourished cells can we still get disease or a virus, or no, we can't? So is it just a theory that healthy, well-nourished cells can we still get disease or a virus, or no, we can't?
Well, in addition to diet and lifestyle, remember I also mentioned genotype. I wasn't talking so much about that this evening, but yes, there are diseases that are genetically transmitted, and one can help to mitigate the effect of those diseases by living a healthy lifestyle and eating the right diet. But there are diseases that will still be able to be how would I call it, to be expressed in your phenotype in your body because of genes that you inherited, and also because there may be chemical damage done by chemicals in your environment. But even in the case where there is chemical damage, for example, when pesticides get into your system, they tend to bind to those phospholipids, and so they damage the membranes of the cell. But if you have a diet that is sufficiently high in antioxidants, it can go a long way to repairing the damage in those cells. So it's not saying that you will never get sick and you'll never die. You will never die, sorry, but it is saying that your diet and lifestyle can go a long way in mitigating effects of diseases that.
Okay. Okay, while Dr. Dupree is out, Sister Sherry, this one is going to come to you. It says very
and I think more and more as we do things, we will realize that diet is very, as a matter of fact, in Genesis, fruits and seeds. Sorry.
Right. She's getting some challenges.
Right. Okay. Her Dr. Dupree internet is seems to be giving a little bit of problem. So I'm gonna let Sister Sherry answer this one in the meantime while we get Dr. Dupree back. And it says very good information, but I would like to know if some conflicts may need a combination of these approaches to solve them. And this is a twofold question because someone is also asking for you to repeat the first 3 points that you had given earlier in conflict resolution.
Okay, give me the first part again.
They are asking if some conflicts may need a combination of all these, all the 5 pointers that you give to resolve them. And someone else is asking, can you repeat the first 3 points that you made?
Okay, let me start with the end, and then I'll go to the beginning. So the first 3 points, I guess the person is referring to the first 3 strategies. Actually, I'll repeat all 5 strategies. The first is withdrawing, and that relates to literally or psychologically withdrawing from the conflict. The second B is accommodating, and that's where you try to work with the other person's needs. The third, forcing. Forcing is where you try to put your own need ahead of the other person. The fifth is compromising, where you give and take either way. And the fifth is collaborating, where you see the conflict more as problem solving. And yes, to the first part, sometimes it takes more than one strategy to work. For example, if you are dealing with a conflict and you're already heated, you're in the midst of it, and but you know within yourself that you cannot, your emotions are so intense, and you know yourself, and you know that you're not going to be able to actively or properly communicate what it is you want to communicate. It may cause you to step back, withdraw, and then approach it another time. It could be another time, it could be later, in any way. It could be another time or another approach, but the point is yes. And then sometimes you can, if you're really looking at solving the problem in a holistic way where both of you are on the same page, you can look at one approach versus the next. So yes, you can use a combination of approaches, or you can start with one approach, and then when you relook the conflict, use a different approach.
Okay.
I hope that answered the question. And Pastor, as usual, you can weigh in.
But I agree with you. I was looking at the chat though. Somebody had a question in the chat there that's very interesting. I don't know if you saw it, but I saw it. And can sex play a part? Yes, it does, actually. That's one of the purposes for sex. It leads to getting rid of stress, and problems arise from people who are stressed out. Stress is the source of a lot of problems.
Pastor, I totally agree with you, but I really wanted to ask that person, when you refer to sex, you see the beauty of the English language. When the person says sex, do they mean that females approach conflicts different to males? Is that where they're coming from? I mean, that could be one way they can look at it.
Oh, that's true too. That's true.
But that's true. English language.
Yeah. So the person needs to say what they mean.
Yes, they need to be more specific. But I agree with you. But while it can be, sorry, Kathy, just give me 10 seconds. While it can be healthy, it can also be detrimental if the approach is wrong, where you want to cause the person to forget what they're feeling, forget the conflict, and then it starts all over again. Maybe that could be the method, but so it is very difficult to just ask a question like that. And yes, it plays a part. It can be a good part, it could be a not so good part.
Okay, we have time for one last question. And this question goes to you too again, Sister Sherry. And it says, would you suggest letting go and allowing life to happen as a form of managing conflicts if one detects the other person is impregnable to advice making communication difficult?
I would say that for a point, yes, you let go and allow life to happen to a point. Again, it depends on where the conflict is. If this is a person that you have to interact with on a daily basis, we're all human, so it may not be that easy to see the person and know that there is something unresolved. If this is some person that you do not have to face on a daily basis, and if it allows you not to feel the frustration and the hurt, you're doing it not for that person, but you're doing it for yourself. So yes, that is one way, but at the time when you realize that in your form of management, you need to confront it, just use the tips that I would have given in terms of being flexible, being respectful, clearly stating, dealing with the point at the matter at hand, and as always, praying to God for guidance.
I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us here for Healing Moments. Thank you, those of you who joined us on YouTube and on our Zoom platform. Remember, Healing Moments is on every Thursday at 6 p.m. So I want you to tell somebody next week that Healing Moments is on. And before we go, Sister Sherry, someone was asking you to repeat your points. So I'm going to let you do the closing thought this week. Sister Sherry.
Repeat my points.
Yes, I don't know if it's the final thought that you gave or the 5 points that you gave, but I'm guessing.
Okay, in being able to effectively resolve your conflicts, listen effectively, identify the specific points of a disagreement, express your own needs clearly, view the conflict as an opportunity for growth, and focus on specific issues without generalizing or escalating the situation. And my quote, let me add, whenever you're in conflict with someone, there is one factor that can make the difference between damaging your relationship and deepening that, and that factor is attitude. Have a good evening, everyone. See you next week.
Until next week, take a healing moment.
Bye.
Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be healthy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment every day. Take a moment for your body. Take a moment for your mind. Take a moment for your spirit. Take a moment to be loved. Take a moment to be happy. Take a moment when you pray. Take a moment for worship. Take a moment to show you care. Take a moment to show you care. Just to show how much you care.